Welcome back to the class, everyone. While it might not be as flashy and glamorous as speed, offense, or even health, tenacity modding can actually be pretty game-changing on a select group of characters. Whether those characters just need tenacity modding to be able to function and do all the things they want to do, or it might just be pushing them in the right direction with a few niche counters. So that is what we're here to do today and what is slowly becoming Modding Monday. I want to talk about 20 characters that can genuinely benefit from tenacity modding. And as I kind of mentioned in the very beginning, these first 8 characters here, they genuinely want a lot of tenacity to be able to do all the normal things that their kit wants them to do, and these bottom 12 characters are going to more so be niche scenarios where they're going to benefit from it, but not necessarily need it to be able to do most of the things they want to do. You might be able to use no tenacity or even have an emphasis of another stat. So getting on into things, let's start with the need category and start with Chrysanthemum himself. Chrysanthemum is a great tank. He's the best tank for Jabba the Hutt with his sticky taunt and really preventing enemy teams from going right after Boosh, because once Boosh is dead, the whole team kind of falls apart. The issue with Chrysanthemum is if an enemy like Lord Vader is able to apply buff immunity and then completely remove the taunt, or I guess even Afro with having dispels as well as B2's buff immunity, Chrysanthemum just becomes immediately useless. So one of the ways that you can counteract this is by loading him up with as much tenacity as possible. I think 180 to 200 is typically considered the healthy range for those exact interactions we just mentioned. And he also will add a little bit, or not, he won't add tenacity, but he adds negative potency with his Grand Arena Omicron, so it does kind of synergize in that way as well. So again, keeping him from getting those debuffs that will keep him from taunting is very important so that you can't just go and immediately kill Boosh. Now, this is most important for Marin up actually against the Jabba counter, because the main way that Marin is beating Jabba in GAC right now is by utilizing her GAC Omicron that really only 100% works if all of her allies have died. The reason why we want tenacity on Marin is because the Jabba the Hutt team has a ton of thermal detonators, which if they apply to everyone, they'll blow everyone up. The whole goal here is to them to not to apply to Marin so that she's the one sole survivor. When she does that, whenever she is going to be reviving an enemy via Talzin lead and then they're being defeated, she gets into a 100% turn meter loop. If she gets thermals towards the beginning of the battle and she blows up, then this process can't really be done. And furthermore, Marin actually just doesn't need a lot of stats at all. She obviously doesn't want speed because it doesn't synergize well with her kit. She already starts with 100% base potency, and that's not even including Mother Talzin's lead or Asajj Ventress's Omicron that will add even more. So ultimately, again, not only does she not really need a lot of the other stats, but she genuinely benefits from tenacity by not getting those detrimental debuffs like thermals on her so that she can do what she needs to do. Next up is going to be Chewbacca, and there are a few counters in general where you want a lot of tenacity, but the main one is General Skywalker, where if Chewbacca is dazed, not only is he going to stop dealing damage, but he's going to stop gaining turn meter from the overall CLS interactions, whether that be from Binds All Things or from CLS's leadership when they resist debuffs because the enemy team has tenacity up. The other really annoying thing about Chewbacca no longer assisting is he's also no longer going to be healing both CLS and Han, assuming you have guard in the proper placement. And different from the other Chewbacca on the team, Chewie or whatever you want to call him, he doesn't have a way to cleanse himself, so if he does get dazed or shocked or whatever it is, he's stuck with it until he can take enough turns to get rid of it. And again, if he can't gain turn meter, that might end up being a really long time. Next up is going to be B2 Super Battle Droid. A little bit similar to Marin in the sense that he doesn't necessarily need speed. He really relies a lot off of turn meter gains, but different from Marin, his turn meter can actually be stopped through days. Marin's is irresistible. B2's is not so. By modding B2 up with a lot of tenacity, we can prevent some of those teams out there from applying daze or shock to him so that he can keep taking as many turns as he wants and applying buff immunity and giving his team more and more turn meter. At least I believe that's how it works for the Separatist droids. Next up is actually going to be Trench. Trench is going to be very similar to B2, and it's interesting because I don't really hear this talked about a lot, but when we look at B2, he has a 40% chance to gain 100% turn meter whenever another ally is evaded or damaged by an attack. You open up Trench's kit and you see almost a word for word comparison under his unique, where it says whenever another non-droid Separatist ally is damaged by an attack, defeated, or evades, Trench has a 50%, so actually even higher, chance to gain 100% turn meter. And we see a pretty similar interaction between the two as well, where with B2, most of the time your enemy gets stuck behind Magna Guard, which forces B2 to gain all those turns. If you're using the right Admiral Trench team, the enemy should either be going after Jango because he got out in the open with the shield generator tech, or if you place the team on defense, you really want to kill Watt first so the Trench doesn't get revived. Either way, you're allowing Trench an opportunity to be able to take bonus turns because he's not always the first one you want dead on the team. So that is kind of, again, the very strong case for characters who need a lot of tenacity. We do have 3 more characters that are going to fit under this mantle, so we'll get into them as well. It's going to be Gar Saxon and Imperial Super Commando. Again, we are looking at, yet again, another gas counter, but I think this modding is even more universal than that. When you look at what Gar Saxon and ISC do, whether under a Maul lead or under Gar Saxon's lead, you really can't daze them or get anything that's going to stop them from assisting out of turn, and they just do so much damage when they do, due to ISC's unique ability, which is rather new, but still very, very, very good. And the magic number, and mine are actually not that good. The magic number is about 165% tenacity that you need on both of them to cut out a non-potency modded gas. You really want to be above that because most gas out there will have just a little bit of potency on accident left over from secondaries. But even if you are running under the Maul lead and you do have that cleanse that goes to the healthiest ally, I've had it so many times where I've used Maul against Gungans in 3v3 where I keep getting Jar Jar's, what I think is the frustrating or frustration debuff on me that doesn't allow for assists, and I can't get them to do damage in the right order. It just overall is just very annoying, and you can solve that entire problem with modding for tenacity. On top of, very similar to the other characters we looked at, the characters genuinely don't really need speed because they're either assisting or countering, so either way, they don't need to necessarily take a turn to go. And then on top of that, the damage immunity they get for 2 turns, a lot of times it's a lot nicer when it lasts longer, and taking fewer turns is going to get you there. Next up is going to be Jolie. Jolie, we actually talked about him recently in our arrow video, or rather characters that don't want speed arrows, and we looked at his unique that said he gets 100% tenacity, and then he turns that tenacity into critical avoidance. And I will say, someone raised the question in the comments, and very rightfully so, whether or not this tenacity is taken into account in the critical avoidance. We dug into the code, and it does appear to be the case. So at any rate, we do want to be aiming for 100% tenacity on Jolie, doubled with the 100% that he has in the unique. That gets him to 100% critical avoidance, and then also, you really just don't want your reviver being stunned when everyone else was dead, or dazed, or ability blocked, or anything like that. So having tenacity again on a character who doesn't necessarily need to be taking a lot of turns or dealing damage is a huge benefit to his team. So these are the characters that are on the more the need side to be able to do what they want to do. Let's talk about some of the characters that are just going to benefit from a little bit here and there. General Hux, one of the main counters to SLKR, is JML, and if you can stop the ability block in the very beginning, it is very nice, because then he will go and cleanse SLKR, and then SLKR can use an AoE and cleanse the entire team. So overall, just really nice synergy. His base tenacity is also really high. It's already over 100%, so just by getting the set as well as a primary on him, you can jump him really high up, which is kind of nice. You can have an impact without having to fully commit to like full 3 tenacity sets. Next up is going to be CLS. The main thing here is that CLS is going to be sharing a lot of his stats via Nubok on the team. That kit wasn't readily available, so we can just go ahead and show it. And one of the nice things about this is that it actually does share tenacity. So that Chewbacca that we were talking about earlier, that we really don't want to be dazed, having a little bit more tenacity on CLS can be beneficial because it's going to be shared to him as well. Again, not necessarily a hard code required to get CLS to work, even against gas, but he does benefit from it overall. Next up is going to be GBA. This is really for like beginning mid-game. If people are trying to solo with Darth Vader, they can pretty easily do that. One of the things that helps curb it out is if you have enough tenacity on GBA here to actually resist the ability block. That way you can cleanse whatever debuffs are on everyone else and then just completely run Vader over. Most people will take more than just Vader, so it doesn't completely close it out. But again, when we're talking about just benefiting a little, it is pretty nice. Again, considering he has 60% tenacity already, so that gets him to a solid 180, 170%. Next up is going to be Nest. Nest benefits from a few different stats. I still really like tenacity because I want her to actually be countering, and if she gets dazed, that stops, especially when you consider that she gets a massive amount of health steal if she's against an enemy that starts accruing a lot of buffs, because then when she's countering, she's actually healing, and then she'll also get to hide behind her bonus protection shell. Now, I will say that you can see when we look at her mods here, we do have her bolstered with health and offense, so she's doing other things as well. A lot of people just go straight health and really capitalize on the fact that you can't get through her if you have a turn meter gaining team like CLS and Imperial Troopers. But again, a character that can benefit from it, even though she can use other stats as well. Next up is going to be Magna Guard. This is pretty standard tank in general, having extra tenacity, stopping that buff immunity so that characters can't go right for B2 overall is important. Not the most important thing for the team to function, but at the same time, it's nice if you can do it. So there's our first category for benefits. We do have a second one down here. K2SO, very similar mindset to that of the tank that we just viewed, Magna Guard. You don't want him to get buff immunity. His taunt is weird. It comes in and out constantly because of how his kit is wired, which is good, but at the same time, if you get buff immunity on him, it's really easy for his taunt to go away. Using ability, has 75% chance to taunt for 1 turn. This taunt is dispelled whenever K2SO takes damage. He counters, so it kind of evens out, but again, it leaves a lot of room for buff immunity or shock to work their way in there. Different from another tank like Bosk, who if you just apply the shocker or the buff immunity to, his taunt isn't going to be consistently removed, or until it is, he'll be able to keep it. One of the nice things about Bosk in here as well is he has a natural 50% tenacity with his leadership, and a lot of people still use his leadership. So again, looking at all the other characters like GBA or like Chrysanthemum, who have a tenacity or negative potency boost, even getting to a smaller number like 120%, the extra 50% on top of that actually can completely shove out certain characters using abilities. Mon Mothma, not the most important character to have tenacity on, again, very much in the benefit area. The big reason being she shares tenacity with the team, and so any stat you can give her that she'll be able to share with the team will be good. It is really nice when her constantly assisting team doesn't get dazed or shocked or ability blocked, especially if the ability block is on a cleansing character, so that is nice. Nobody uses it anymore, but when it used to be a counter to Grievous, stopping the target locks out the gate were kind of nice. Next up is going to be Morgan, and Morgan actually might be in the need category, but it's going to highly depend on the counter you're wanting to use. If you're using Great Mothers against JMK, then overall, the amount of debuffs they put out, it really isn't enough to warrant tenacity modding. You're probably better off with something like defense and protection primaries. But overall, for some of the most relevant counters to Great Mothers right now, they're very high in debuffs. I'm looking specifically at Lord Vader and Sith Empire, and not just being able to control Morgan the entire time with shock or buff immunity or fear or whatever it is really stinking nice when she has tenacity. It's actually why I have mine modded like that and why I put her on defense. I put her with Marin in 5v5 as well to even dispel those debuffs on the other characters that get them at the same time. But even then, not having to wait for Marin to take a turn has been pretty nice. Next up is going to be Wampa, and Wampa will kill a lot of things without tenacity. But if you're looking at some of like his highest ceiling characters that he can beat, you do want tenacity on him, because if I've seen it happen before. I've seen people taking a Wampa with no extra tenacity modding, really just relying on the 100% he's getting here, and then, the naturally accruing amount later. Goes up against Iden. Iden was potency modded. He had no tenacity other than that 100% that was sitting there. She lands the initial stun on her first move, and then Wampa can't counter and gain turn meter, so he just sits there like a sitting duck, and Iden just eventually kills him. Also, Wampa can be a counter for Star Killer in 3v3, and one of the issues that you'll run into there with Mara Jade is that she'll go to stun very first before she applies the tenacity down, and if she actually lands it, or rather the stun, not the tenacity down she'll land no matter what. But if she lands the stun, then you can't cleanse the tenacity down, and then they just completely wreck you. So again, having enough tenacity in the very beginning to bolster with the 100% before it starts accruing and getting to stupid high numbers can be very nice. So our final characters for tenacity is actually going to be Storm and Shore, and actually are going to be about that counter that we just talked about. This is really, again, niche. If you have High Relic Stormtrooper and Shore Trooper for whatever reason, and you're going to put it on defense as Wampa bait, if you mod both of them for really high tenacity and they can't be killed with dots, Wampa typically just times out. Even with the stacking damage throughout the fight, he doesn't have enough to beat them with the amount they're healing, especially because if their tenacity is high enough, Wampa won't ever get healing immunity on them. The dots will never really accrue high enough. Iden will be able to cleanse them, and then eventually be able to take down. Actually, I believe the dots are irresistible, but again, Iden can cleanse them, and then the healing immunity not landed is actually what's important there. So those are the 20 characters. I did want to throw in 2 honorable mentions with Jabba and Armorer. The reason why they're honorable mentions and not in the other 2 categories is because I don't think I would ever recommend that you look and farm tenacity mods for them, but it's kind of a nice filler for them if you have one. Like this mod on Jabba is actually a perfect example. 25 speed mod, health primary, which Jabba does like, with some extra tenacity on top of it. Sure, he can take it. It doesn't necessarily exclude any counters, but it can make some very, very specific situations more difficult. If you look at Night Sisters and you're in an environment against Jabba where he has so much defense that the only way they can kill him is with like 400 stacks of Plague, mitigating some of those stacks of Plague can be helpful. And yes, you actually can kill Jabba with Plague. It just takes, again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and he has to be somewhere in the yellow or red. Same can be said about armor. Most of the time, you just want her to take one turn to be able to apply her Beskar. I actually don't have mods that really align with Tenacity on her, so she's not here. But it can be helpful if you don't want her to get ability blocked or stunned before she takes her first move. So there are 20 characters and our extra 2 honorable mentions. Let us know in the comments if there are any other characters that you like to put Tenacity on. But until the next time, stay awesome.